I always believed that family came first, that blood was thicker than water, and that my parents would never betray the trust my grandmother placed in them. When Grandma Patricia passed away 5 years ago, she left me a special wedding fund of $25,000, managed by my parents until I turned 25. At 27, I was finally ready to use it for my dream wedding with Marcus. I had no idea that my twin sister Sophia would need it more than me, or so my parents thought. Before we dive into this story, I would love to know where you are watching from. Please hit that like button if you believe families should keep their promises, and do not forget to subscribe, because you will not believe how this situation unfolds. Trust me, this gets much more complicated than you might think. Growing up as twins, Sophia and I could not have been more different, despite sharing the same DNA and birthday. While I spent my childhood reading books and helping Mom with household chores, Sophia was always the center of attention, charming everyone with her bubbly personality and dramatic flair. She was the princess of our family, always getting the bigger bedroom, the newer clothes, and the benefit of the doubt whenever we got into trouble together. I learned early on to be independent and self-reliant, working part-time jobs throughout high school, while Sophia focused on her social life and dating. Our grandmother Patricia recognized these differences and always had a special bond with me. She appreciated my work ethic and determination, often telling me that I reminded her of herself when she was young. When she passed away from cancer, she left me her most precious gift, a wedding fund that she had been saving for years, specifically for my future marriage. The money came with clear instructions. It was only to be used for my wedding expenses, and my parents would manage it until I reached 25 years old. The sum of $25,000 felt like a fortune to me, representing not just financial security, but also my grandmother's love and faith in my future. Now at 27, I work as a successful graphic designer for a marketing agency in downtown Portland. I have my own apartment, a reliable car, and a healthy savings account. My relationship with Marcus, a 29-year-old software engineer, has been solid for 2 years. We complement each other perfectly. He is steady and logical, while I bring creativity and spontaneity to our partnership. We had been discussing marriage seriously for the past 6 months, planning a beautiful spring wedding for next year with the help of my grandmother's generous gift. I trusted my parents completely when it came to managing the wedding fund. Dad would always reassure me whenever I brought it up, saying the money was safe and growing with interest. Mom would smile and tell me how proud Grandma would be to see me use the money for such a happy occasion. I never doubted their word, because they had never given me a reason to question their integrity before. Everything changed 3 months ago when Sophia burst through our parents' front door during our weekly Sunday dinner, practically glowing with excitement. She announced that Tyler, a 31-year-old CEO of a tech startup she had been dating for only 8 months, had proposed to her during a weekend getaway in Napa Valley. The diamond on her finger was enormous, easily 3 carats, and she could not stop gushing about their whirlwind romance and how Tyler was her soulmate. What shocked me more than the sudden engagement was Sophia's timeline. She wanted to get married in just 4 months, claiming that Tyler's business schedule and some important investor meetings made a spring wedding impossible. She had already started researching venues and had her heart set on the Grand Heritage Hotel, a luxury location that typically cost around $50,000 just for the venue rental. When I gently asked about the budget for such an elaborate celebration, Sophia waved off my concerns with a laugh. Dad and Mom seemed unusually enthusiastic about Sophia's wedding plans, immediately jumping into discussions about guest lists, catering options, and photography packages. I watched Mom's eyes light up as Sophia described her dream dress, a custom design from a high-end boutique that would cost around $8,000. Dad nodded approvingly when Tyler mentioned flying in his family from the East Coast and putting them up in the hotel for the weekend. When I privately asked Dad about the source of funding for such an expensive celebration, he gave me a strange look and told me not to worry about it. He said that Tyler's family was contributing substantially, and that he and Mom had been saving up for this day. Something in his tone felt off, but I pushed away my doubts because I wanted to be supportive of my sister's happiness. Mom's behavior became increasingly evasive whenever I brought up any financial questions about the wedding. She would quickly change the subject or suddenly remember an urgent task that needed her immediate attention. Even more puzzling was Sophia's attitude when the topic of money came up. My normally chatty sister would become quiet and avoid making eye contact, which was completely unlike her usual confident demeanor. Despite these red flags, I convinced myself that my parents were simply being protective of their financial privacy. After all, they had successfully managed my wedding fund for years without any problems. I decided to focus on my own relationship and trust that everything was being handled appropriately by the adults in the family. The first real crack in my trust appeared on a rainy Tuesday afternoon when I stopped by my parents' house to drop off some marketing materials Dad had requested for his small business. Mom was rushing around getting ready for a dentist appointment, and in her hurry, she accidentally knocked over her purse, spilling its contents across the kitchen floor. As I helped her gather everything, I noticed a bank statement that had fallen partially under the refrigerator. Without thinking, I glanced at it while handing it back to her, and my blood ran cold. The statement header clearly read, Noel Wedding Fund Account, and the current balance showed $3,247.32. My heart started pounding as I processed this information. The account that should have contained $25,000, plus several years of interest, now held barely enough to cover a modest reception dinner. Mom snatched the paper from my hands quickly, her face flushed with what I now realized was guilt rather than embarrassment. She mumbled something about needing to get to her appointment and practically pushed me out the door. I sat in my car for 20 minutes afterward, trying to make sense of what I had seen. There had to be a reasonable explanation. Maybe the money had been transferred to a higher interest account, or perhaps there were multiple accounts I did not know about. That evening, I could not focus on anything. Marcus noticed my distracted behavior during dinner and asked what was wrong. I shared what I had seen, hoping he would help me rationalize it away. Instead, his expression grew serious, and he suggested that I needed to investigate further. The idea of distrusting my parents felt wrong, but the evidence was too significant to ignore. I spent a sleepless night debating whether to confront my parents directly or gather more information first. By morning, I had decided that I needed concrete facts before making any accusations. I took a personal day off work and drove to the bank where my wedding fund account was held. As the original beneficiary named in my grandmother's will, I had the legal right to access information about the account. The bank teller, a kind middle-aged woman named Janet, pulled up my account information after verifying my identity. She handed me a printed transaction history for the past 6 months, and what I saw made my hands shake. 3 months earlier, large withdrawals had begun appearing regularly. The memo lines told the devastating story: Sophia Wedding Venue deposit $5,000. Sophia Dress Payment, $8,000. Sophia Catering Advance, $7,000. Sophia Photographer Retainer, $3,000. Page after page detailed the systematic draining of my inheritance. Every dream Sophia had shared about her perfect wedding had been funded by money that rightfully belonged to me. The total amount withdrawn was $21,753, leaving me with barely enough to cover a courthouse ceremony. I felt physically ill as the reality sank in. My parents had not just borrowed from my fund, they had essentially stolen my grandmother's gift to subsidize my sister's fairy tale wedding. Janet noticed my distress and offered me a glass of water and a private office to compose myself. I sat there for an hour, cycling through disbelief, anger, and profound sadness. The betrayal cut deeper than just the money. My parents had looked me in the eye for months, reassuring me about my wedding fund, while simultaneously depleting it for someone else's benefit. The trust that had taken 27 years to build was crumbling in real time. I called Marcus from the bank parking lot, and he immediately left work to come be with me. When I showed him the bank statements, his face went through the same emotional journey I had just experienced. He held me while I cried, not just for the lost money, but for the lost innocence of believing my family would always protect my interests. We sat in his car discussing our options, and he suggested that I needed to confront them immediately rather than letting this fester. I decided to wait until our regular Sunday family dinner to address the situation. I needed time to process my emotions and plan what I would say. The week dragged by painfully with each phone call from Mom or text from Dad feeling like additional salt in the wound. They continued to act normally, asking about my work and my relationship with Marcus, as if they had not just devastated my financial future. Sophia called me twice during that week to share more wedding details, including how excited she was about the flowers and how perfect the venue looked during her final walkthrough. Every word felt like a dagger, because I now knew that her joy was built on my loss. She mentioned how grateful she was to Mom and Dad for making everything possible, and I had to excuse myself from the conversation before I said something I would regret. Sunday dinner at my parents' house had always been a sacred tradition in our family. Mom would cook pot roast with all the fixings, and we would spend hours around the dining room table catching up on each other's lives. This particular Sunday felt surreal, as I sat there with the bank statements hidden in my purse, watching my family maintain their facade of normalcy. Sophia arrived 30 minutes late as usual, bubbling with enthusiasm about her final dress fitting scheduled for the following week. She pulled out her phone to show us pictures of the venue setup and the centerpiece arrangements. Dad beamed with pride as she described how impressed Tyler's family was with all the elegant details. Mom kept nodding and smiling, occasionally glancing at me with what I now recognized as nervous guilt. The conversation that broke me happened during dessert. Sophia was explaining how the wedding planner had suggested upgrading to premium linens and upgraded lighting packages. She laughed as she told us how she had immediately agreed because life is too short for cheap decorations. Then she looked directly at our parents and said, "I cannot even express how grateful I am that you made this dream possible. Some people have to settle for basic weddings, but you have given me something truly special." Or, Dad reached over and patted Sophia's hand, telling her that she deserved the best and that family always comes first. Mom wiped away a tear and talked about how much joy it brought her to see Sophia so happy. They spoke about sacrifices and doing anything for their children, completely oblivious to the fact that their sacrificial lamb was sitting right across the table from them. I could not take another second of the performance. I reached into my purse, pulled out the bank statements, and placed them on the table next to Sophia's dessert plate. The silence that followed was deafening. Sophia's face drained of all color as she recognized what the papers represented. Dad started stammering about how they could explain everything while Mom immediately burst into tears. Dad's explanation was pathetic and insulting. He claimed that taking the money was only temporary, that they planned to pay it back before my wedding. He talked about Sophia needing this opportunity more than I did because Tyler came from wealth and they had to make a good impression on his family. Mom sobbed about how Sophia was more vulnerable and needed their protection while I was strong and successful enough to figure things out on my own. The worst part was when Sophia finally found her voice and admitted that she had known about the arrangement from the beginning. She looked me in the eye and said, "You have a good job, and Marcus has money. You do not need it like I do." She actually tried to justify the theft by claiming that I was more capable of creating my own wedding fund while she needed help to secure her future with Tyler. I exploded. 27 years of being the responsible one, the reliable one, the one who never caused problems came pouring out. I told them about every time I had felt like the second choice, every instance where Sophia's needs came before mine, every moment I had swallowed my disappointment to keep the peace. The money was not just about my wedding. It was about my grandmother's love and trust, which they had violated without a second thought. When Dad tried to defend their decision by saying that Sophia was more fragile and needed a perfect start to her marriage, I realized that nothing I said would change their perspective. In their eyes, I would always be the strong one who could handle disappointment, while Sophia would always be the princess who deserved to be rescued. I told them that they had made their choice, and now I was making mine. I stood up from the table, looked at each of them one final time, and told them that they were no longer my family. Sophia cried and begged me not to overreact, insisting that I was being dramatic over money. Dad tried to guilt me about abandoning the family over a financial misunderstanding. Mom pleaded with me to think about forgiveness and moving forward together. I walked out of that house knowing that I would never return as long as any of them lived there. The 18 months that followed were the most challenging and liberating period of my life. I blocked all their phone numbers, returned their letters unopened, and refused to respond to their attempts to reach me through mutual friends. Marcus stood by me, completely understanding that I needed to protect my mental health and rebuild my sense of self-worth outside of their toxic dynamics. Initially, the grief was overwhelming. I mourned not just the loss of the money, but the death of my illusions about family loyalty and unconditional love. I went through periods of anger, sadness, and doubt, sometimes wondering if I was being too harsh or stubborn. Marcus and I attended couples counseling to work through the impact of this betrayal on our relationship and our future plans. We decided to move forward with our own wedding plans using our combined savings and contributions from Marcus's family. Instead of the elaborate celebration I had originally envisioned, we planned a beautiful courthouse ceremony followed by an intimate reception at a local restaurant for 30 close friends. The wedding ended up being more meaningful and personal than any expensive extravaganza could have been. Our honeymoon trip to Europe was funded entirely by money we had earned and saved together. We spent 2 weeks exploring Italy and France, creating memories that belonged only to us, without any complicated family history attached. For the first time in my life, I experienced what it felt like to make decisions based purely on what Marcus and I wanted, without considering how it would affect family dynamics or whether it would cause drama. My career flourished during this period of independence. Without the emotional drain of family obligations and toxic relationships, I had more energy to focus on my professional goals. I started freelancing on weekends and eventually saved enough to open my own graphic design studio. My income doubled within the first year, and I discovered a level of confidence and self-reliance that I had never known existed. Marcus and I grew stronger as a couple without the interference of my dysfunctional family relationships. We created our own traditions, developed friendships with other couples who shared our values, and learned what it meant to have a peaceful home life without constant drama. I realized that the concept of chosen family was not just a trendy phrase, but a legitimate and healthier alternative to blood relations that cause more harm than good. Our circle of friends became our new family, celebrating our successes and supporting us through challenges without hidden agendas or manipulative behavior. I experienced genuine care and respect from people who valued me for who I was, rather than what I could provide or how I could be useful to them. These relationships taught me what healthy love actually looked like compared to the conditional affection I had grown up with. The peace and stability of my new life allowed me to process the trauma of my childhood and recognize patterns of favoritism and emotional manipulation that I had normalized for decades. I began to understand that my parents' treatment of me was not my fault, and that I deserved better than being the family scapegoat who was expected to sacrifice for everyone else's happiness. 18 months after cutting contact, my phone rang with Dad's number. I almost declined the call automatically, but something made me answer. His voice was shaky and defeated in a way I had never heard before. He told me that Sophia's marriage had fallen apart after only 8 months when Tyler discovered her massive credit card debt and impulsive spending habits. The fairy tale wedding had been followed by financial chaos and constant arguments about money. Tyler had filed for divorce and moved out, leaving Sophia with debt collectors calling daily and no means to support the lifestyle she had grown accustomed to. She had moved back in with our parents, bringing her financial problems with her. Dad explained that he and Mom had depleted their retirement savings to pay for the wedding and were now facing foreclosure on their house because they could not keep up with the mortgage payments. The situation had become even more desperate because Mom had been diagnosed with diabetes and high blood pressure, requiring expensive medications and regular doctor visits that strained their already tight budget. Dad was calling to ask if I would consider helping them financially and emotionally, suggesting that families should stick together during difficult times. He apologized for the way they had treated me and claimed that they had learned their lesson about favoritism and poor decisions. I listened to his entire plea without interrupting, feeling surprisingly calm and detached from the drama that would have consumed me in the past. When he finished talking, I thanked him for the information and told him that I hoped they would find a way to work through their challenges. I explained that I had built a good life without them and had no intention of returning to a family dynamic that had been harmful to my well-being for so long. Dad started to cry, begging me to reconsider and promising that things would be different if I came back. I felt no satisfaction in his pain, but I also felt no obligation to rescue them from the consequences of their own choices. I told him that I forgave them for my own peace of mind, but forgiveness did not mean I had to subject myself to their dysfunction again. Sometimes, the most loving thing you can do for yourself is to walk away from people who consistently choose others over you. The call ended with him understanding that my decision was final. I have not heard from any of them since, and my life continues to be peaceful and fulfilling. Marcus and I are discussing starting our own family, creating the kind of loving and stable environment that we both want for our future children. I learned that blood relationships are not automatically sacred, and that self-respect is worth more than keeping peace with people who do not value you. Have you ever had to make the difficult decision to cut toxic family members out of your life? Share your experiences in the comments below, because I know many of you have faced similar situations. If this story resonated with you, please give it a like and subscribe for more real-life family stories that explore the complicated dynamics we all navigate. Don't forget to share this video with anyone who might need to hear that it's okay to choose your own well-being over family expectations. Thank you for listening to my story, and I hope it helps you remember that you deserve to be treated with respect and love, even by the people who are supposed to care about you the most. Sometimes the family you choose loves you better than the one you're born into, and that's perfectly okay.